Yeah, go ahead, just in case.
Y'all good upstairs? I forget their names. Mark, you good upstairs?
We're all set.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll start the Budget Advisory Committee on February 18th, 2021 at 2 p.m. Roll call, please.
Chair Banther?
Here.
Vice Chair Hales? Here. Mr. Doddridge is absent. Mr. Kudos?
Here.
Mr. McCloy?
Here.
Ms. Hall? And Mr. Bergman?
Here.
Okay, our first item is, I think these are all three grouped together, right, Michelle?
That would be up to Ron.
Yes, they are.
All together. So we're going to do 1, 2, and 3 together.
Correct.
Pause for questions, of course. Thank you.
Okay. Well, nice to see you all again. And I know it's been a while, and that's probably present. I got like 50 pages here. I just got all this good stuff for you. But I know the big thing was COVID-19. We're going to go over some of that, what's happened with the revenues, expenditures, a financial update for fiscal year 2020, which is unaudited. We've got the auditors here currently, so they're wrapping up. And then a financial update of 2021, the current year through December. COVID-19, as you know, I might have seen this slide already, but back when it started, we started to do a month-to-month comparison of the sales tax receipts. The main sales tax receipts are the half-cents sales tax down here, the revenue sharing, the penny, and the gas tax. So as you can see, going across here, like in May, it was this one was $31,000 down from the previous year, and going across June, July, August, September. So the half-cent sales tax was down 105,000 for these 5 months. And then going on the line with the revenue sharing penny and gas tax. For a total of $297,000, we were down in these 4 sales taxes for those months. Now, it started to turn a little bit better in August. It's in the green here, where we were negatives in the totals. But then we were in the positive 27,000 here, and then $146 September. Getting into the first 3 months of this year, same sort of slide. I'm still seeing improvement. Same for revenue, sales tax revenues. Still seeing the positive numbers here for an overall positive of 5,700. We don't have the penny money for December, but if we did, it would increase this a little bit more. The revenue sharing is a constant amount. The state sets it in June of 2020. So that's it. We get the same amount each month. It's different from half-cent and penny and gas. They go by actual sales tax revenues. So that's why it's the same amount each month going down. What they usually do, or what they do in June of 2021 this year, they go back and adjust it. And I'm expecting a decent size, probably positive adjustment for the year. So I'm hoping that at the end of the year, we'll be not as bad as what's here. Trying to just go into actual numbers at the end of the fiscal year, those sales tax revenues at the end of 2019, what we had for those 2020. In total for the year, revenue sharing was down 67,000, half-cent 79,000. Penny was actually up 40,000 because it had some increases in the first few months that offset the negatives. And then gas tax, people weren't traveling, is down 33,000. So for a total negative of 140,000 for the year, comparing 2020 at the end of the year to 2019. And then some other revenues that were affected were the recreation fees for the year, down 171,000. Cultural performing art ticket sales, down 139,000 for the year. Interest earnings, down 138,000, where we were earning up to 3% a couple years ago. Now we're under 1%. Utility penalties, turn-on fees, they were waived for 5 or 6 months. That was a revenue reduction of 131,000 without assessing penalties and turn-ons. Golf course revenues, it's a positive number because initially from being closed, they were down here $85,000 after being closed. I think after the golf course reopened, I think people wanted something to do, and it had its best summer months from June, July, and August. So they recouped the 85,000 plus ended up at positive 14,000. So we had a total revenue loss between those revenues of $706,000. Now, I just mentioned down here, there's nothing so far where we can submit for reimbursement for revenue loss yet, but you know, you never know with the governments and what's going to come through, but there's no supplement for that. Getting into the expenditure side of it, how COVID affected us. Not including the police department. I've separated them out because they've got their own grant, which is down here, 112,000, which they did get and they're submitting monthly for. But these are other expenditures which total 593,000 that were COVID related. Like I say, but not the police department, you know, payroll costs, paid sick time, PPE equipment, facility improvements, COVID testing. And the big one was really teleworking, Zoom, the equipment for that, and staffing, $408,000. What we did and what was available, and we did apply for it, and we're expecting reimbursement, hopefully, through Pinellas Cares, through the county, Pinellas County, there's a local government coronavirus relief fund. We've submitted for reimbursement for $524,000. So hopefully we'll get back a good chunk of that $593,000. Getting into 2020. Just some little highlights here. Unassigned fund balance, as we mentioned earlier, going down about 240,000 to 8.5 million, close to 8.6. The fund balance as a percentage of expenditures is 32%. I mentioned that because the fund balance policy is 20%, which at 20% it would be 5.3 million. We're at 8.5 million, so we're still, you know, 3.2 million over the minimum fund balance based on the policy. Also, during the year, we received 720,000 for the perpetual exclusive easement for the cell tower at Fire Station 70. The money has been restricted as part of fund balance in the general fund.
Quick question. What does that actually, could you expand upon that point? What does that actually mean?
The perpetual exclusive easement?
Yes, and is a restricted balance.
Well, I don't know if you know, there's a cell tower out there at Station 70. They've been paying rent there and to the tune of about a little over $40,000 a year, which is a revenue we won't have in the general fund anymore.
Okay.
So the cell tower company said they would like to just pay an indefinite amount and they don't have to pay the rent anymore. So they've got that cell tower there. They paid $720,000 for the right to still have that cell tower there, but they paid the city $720,000.
Okay.
We set it aside, you know, if I didn't set it aside, it would end up in unassigned fund balance. So I figured, in talking to the city manager, until I guess the board decides what do they want to use that money for, we just set it aside in fund balance, its own little restricted perpetual exclusive easement until they decide what they might want to do with that money. Does that help? Just trying to point out that, and I'll get to it another slide, but electric utility 224,000 over budget, which was unexpected, but sometimes with Duke, we never know when they're increasing the rates and decreasing the rates. And from what I hear for next year or this year, they are going to be decreasing the rates 2.8%. So that was nice to get 224,000 over budget this year. Construction revenue activity actually increased this year. We had permit fees came in almost 47,000 over budget. The city received the remaining portion of Hurricane Irma, and it was an unbudgeted amount, so we got 56,000. The city received a library donation from an individual amount of 54,000, but that's part of restricted donations. The city had the 155,000 small business endurance grant that the city issued to the businesses, $1,000 each. Another thing worth mentioning is when COVID started, departments were directed to not have any unnecessary expenditures. And at the end of the year, this really helped the city offset the 500,000 of COVID expenditures. As mentioned earlier, on the other side, police department received 112,000 grant for COVID related expenditures. And as I mentioned previously, the 524,000 that the county has that we've applied for COVID funding. And just to mention, the cemetery expansion phase 1 began, and it's at a cost of 1.1 million funded by the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, which is a restricted fund balance in the general fund. Some other items in the water and sewer fund, so far unaudited yet, but fund balance has increased by $1 million to 9.2 million. But it's mostly due to revenues coming in over budget and two larger capital projects for Seabreeze Drive sewering and a water well project. Seabreeze Drive sewering is about a $2 million project, and the new water well project is about a $1.1 million project. It was last year, didn't get started last year. Water consumption is up in 2020, 3.5%, which was nice because I think that's why part of the reason why the revenues were over budget. I budgeted a little conservatively on the revenue budget for 2020 because the previous 2 years we had 3% declines each year. So I go, well, this is going to be a trend. We might have another 3%. So it was nice to see the consumption increase this year. Maybe people sitting home more, I'm not sure. Effluent was also up 8%. A lot of it was due to the new line that was put out to West Winds subdivision for reclaim. And as mentioned, water sales came in 371,000 over budget, sewer 317,000 over budget. And just to mention the one debt the city has besides the fire truck lease, but the water plant bond, we paid $940,000 in principal this year. The outstanding balance is $30.6 million. Major capital projects completed during the year. Well, those capital projects of $7.6 million, but some of the bigger ones was the West Wind reclaim line of $1.4 million. We had clarifier improvements at the sewage treatment plant, $1.1 million. Raw water wells, $1.3 million, and solar energy improvements at the water plant, $606,000. Some other governmental funds, some things that have happened. Impact fees came in slightly over budget. Impact fee rate study was done. Rates were for police, fire, library, parks, and recreation, and general government. In total, were reduced 35%. Per charter changes, what formerly was the Street and Sidewalk Improvement Fund was changed to the Sidewalk Improvement Fund. And 100,000 of that was used towards sidewalks this year. The balance remaining is 1 point. The fire ladder truck was purchased by lease purchase, $1,994,000, a 5-year lease at 3.08%. The Penny Fund received $300,000 from Pinellas County as part of the dredging agreement for the Anclote River. The Penny Fund had about $4 million of capital expenditures during 2020. Some of the bigger ones were the fire ladder truck, police vehicles, Anclote River dredging, Court Street improvements, library improvements, and cultural center improvements.
Ron, is that 300,000 from the county for the dredge? Was that back like when I was just a commissioner, 2015, 2016, the original 300 grand they promised, or is this something in addition extra?
I think this was something new with this.
It's new. Okay.
Yeah.
In addition to, all right.
Some of the other enterprise funds, not to leave them out too. We had the sanitation fund, came in 137,000 over budget, mostly due to increase in contractor fees and also the county passing on disposal fees at the county. Engineering work has began on relocation of the yard waste facility due to Mears Boulevard construction and some turn lanes there also. Stormwater fund came in 40,000 over budget. Palm Avenue was a big project for stormwater, had expenses of 693,000. A Swift Mud grant is going to reimburse almost 250,000. Pent Grove Stormwater Project, which is this big, if you see a bunch of big pipes over here next to on the other side of the east side of the building here, that's the stormwater drainage project. Pent Grove's approved for 3.2 million. Like I said, construction began just a few months ago. We have a Swift Mud grant to reimburse almost 1.4 million of that. And as mentioned earlier, the golf course was closed for over a month. Still had an increase of 14,000 in fees over the year due to the summer months and golfers and coming out. The golf course, I just want to mention, a majority of municipal golf courses are in a negative financial position. What we've done here to try to reduce a negative position is we've eliminated the interfund transfer to the general fund has been eliminated. At one time years ago, it was 250,000. We gradually brought it down and now we just zeroed it out. No more transfer to the general fund. Rates were increased slightly, not much. And like I say, hopefully with some good weather, we'll see an increase in golf course revenues. And it's always dependent on that weather and what's going on. Marina fees were increased on December 3rd, 2019. Revenues increased 61,000 over the previous 2019. And with this increase, because before this increase, operating revenue was maybe down 20. It's a small fund. It's maybe 100,000 of revenues a year, but the revenues were down maybe 20,000 a year, and we're starting to see it creeping into the negative fund balance. So hopefully, with the increase in revenue fees, we can keep that fund more stable and in a positive fund balance. And marina improvements were completed in the fall 2019. The cost of that was $618,000. Some other financial items, and you might know, maybe this was brought before you, but the investment policy, we increased the limit on CDs to 40% and treasury bills. Debt, we paid the debt payment on September, 1.5 million on the water plant bond. Fire ladder truck, we made the first payment in June on that, 239,000. Budget resolutions, we had 3 of them during the year. You probably heard about them. The first one was bring over stuff from the previous year, 2019. Then there's one in the middle year for some stuff that came up. And then there was a final one in November, which is like a lot of cleanup for stuff that didn't get caught during the first part of the year or came up during the year. Auditors, we got the auditor firm, the internal auditor where we contract out. We're almost done with the payroll timekeeping audit. We're going to meet with them next week on that. The external auditor, as we were talking about earlier, is the new firm, Malden Jenkins. They're here right now. They've been here in the building for 2 weeks, all 5 of them. So it's their first year, so they got a lot of questions and stuff. And so the audit has to be done by the end of March to be in compliance with the state. Some numbers on the general fund for 2020, how it ended up so far unaudited. I know there's a lot of numbers on it. I just wanted to focus on, you talk about, okay, we lost all these revenues and stuff in the general fund. I tried to separate out restricted revenues here from unrestricted. And highlighted here, we still came in $72,000 over budget on the revenues. And I've got a slide next, I'll show you why. And down here under expenditures, I separate out the restricted expenditures from unrestricted, and really we came in $70,000 under budget on those expenditures. So some good positive numbers here compared to when COVID started, and we were thinking we were going to go down $400,000 or $500,000 in revenues, which we almost did, but in unassigned fund balance too. These are revenues that help offset the loss from the COVID revenues, the sales tax, and all those other revenues. Like I mentioned earlier, utility tax electric, it was 2.3 million in 2019, ended up almost 2.5 million in 2020. So in actual wise, $143,000 more. The budget was 2,263,000. So really, it came in 224,000 over the budget here. The actuals came in over the budget of 224,000. And just going down the line, these are the main ones that came in over budget to a total of 536,000, which helped offset that loss in COVID revenues. So fortunately, we had, especially the utility tax electric from Duke, that, like I say, to help offset that loss in the COVID revenues.
Ron, can you just remind us what that total loss was for 2020 for the COVID revenues? I mean,
for COVID?
We see the plus, and that's great, but just to compare it to the loss, I just forgot.
Well, I just had it there. About $706,000.
So that's including, is that number above it in parentheses accounting for? No. So now are we only lost like 200,000 with that 5, or is that 5 included above there?
Well, the 706,000 is a couple funds here. You've got the water and sewer fund here.
Yeah.
So if you're just talking general fund, you'd have to back out this enterprise fund, 131,000
Sure.
off of that. Bring it in under, a little
So
under
the-
600,000.
If the general fund was just negative, if you will, 171, right? If I read that correctly? Or no, it's three. It's those three combined together, correct?
The general fund negative,
The enterprise fund there, right? Because you have three general fund lines there.
right, that one right there.
Okay, so it'd be like 350 or 370 or something, right? Or more than that, actually.
Well, that plus this up here.
Okay,
So you've got the 140, this 706,000 is 140,000 plus a 566.
okay.
So if you're backing out this 131,000, you're in the mid 500,000s there.
So with that slide that I asked the question on that had like total, that was revenues that were exceeded, correct? Upwards of 500,000 right there, the 536.
Right.
So it's not, so can you compare that to the $700,000 loss, or is that just all different funds we're talking about?
Though the 700,000 was, like I say, it had some water and sewer fund in there, the 130,000. So they're close to really between these offsetting those COVID revenue losses.
It's almost exactly offset. Very good. That was my question.
Now, these are some of the bigger, let's say, go into more detail, but the general fund has like about 150 line items of revenue. There's some other ones in between there where we had 20,000 positive, 20,000 negative. I just didn't want to show all those and stuff. So I'm just trying to hit the bigger ones.
Overall, there was income to negate those losses somewhat.
Right. Pretty much the COVID revenues in the general fund that we lost were offset by these ones coming
Very
in
good.
here.
Very good. Thank you.
Sure. And hopefully, I don't know if you can see this, but this is getting to the fund balance of the general fund, the different pots of money. It's broken down between, keep missing the wrong button here. The restricted reserves, which I mentioned down here, restricted reserves are required to be restricted by either city ordinance resolution or required accounting standards. So just going across here, we have the cemetery perpetual care, which at the beginning of the year had almost 1.9 million. Revenues came in at 255,000. At 1.2 million of expenditures. Now this includes an encumbrance of, I think, about 500,000, leaving about 924,000 at the end of the year, projected at the end of 2020. I don't know if I need to go through all these here, but like compensated absences, 1.3 million. We had an adjustment to raise it up 143,000. Usually it's on, you're probably going, maybe you're asked, what's our compensated absences? If everybody in the general fund left and terminated or resigned on September 30th, this 1,475,000 would pay off everybody's salary and their benefits. If everybody left from the general fund, that's the money that's reserved off there. Usually that 143,000, it's only like maybe 35,000. What we found out, there was a lot of people didn't take vacation time, including myself. I guess I didn't get time to. So we saw this bump up a little higher here, by over 100,000. And anything that affects the restricted accounts, that 143,000 is less money. So that's got to come off of the unassigned fund balance. Well, I've got to settle these restricted balances first, and then what's left over goes into unassigned fund balance. So like I said, you got cemetery perpetual care, compensated absences, tree bank, and on down the line of these other required restricted reserves here. And here's a perpetual exclusive easement where we set aside the 720,000. I also highlighted the hospital ER reserve, which is it's setting aside the money that the hospital's paying. It's over 300,000. But part of the agreement is they need to get the ER done and certification by July 31st, 2022. So for the past 3 years, we've been setting aside the money. It's up to 167,000 right now. So if they complete the ER, if they did right now today, we would be cutting them a check for 167,000 because they've got the ER done. I'm not sure if they've started the ER or not, but that's what that money is, if you're wondering. And then getting down to the projected unassigned fund balance at the beginning of the year, we were 8.8 million, and currently projecting it'll be 8.8,578,000, about $240,000 less than the end of the previous year. You know, that's why I say at the beginning when COVID started, we were thinking this is going to go down 400,000 or 500,000. So it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be.
Ron, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In regards to insurance and other, what's built into that other? With for the line for insurance with other, what's the other?
Well, it's just what it is we've gotten some insurance reimbursement. It was just management's decision to, we paid too much and we got refunds. So we've called it other because really it's not really tied to, we've usually only been using it to help out when we're trying to budget for the health insurance and maybe the next year. We've used that money for health to help with the health insurance. I put other there because really it doesn't have to go to insurance. If we wanted to, we could use it for something else because we paid too much to the insurance company. And when they audited it at the end of the year, they gave us more money back. Sometimes we were getting back maybe about 30,000 a year. So that's why I've got other mentioned there. That's just not for insurance. But
In the 240,781 that was taken out of the unassigned fund balance, is that balance going to get returned back in, or what's the plan with that? How does that work?
well, we hope we'll see how, when we get into 2021, we'll see how 2021, ends up, and if it's decided, if we get the 524,000 back from the county for COVID cares, do we want to use part of that money and put that back into unassigned fund balance? So, I mean, yes, there is thoughts of, but we just have to see how 2021 goes and how the revenues are coming in.
And of that 781, 155 of that was used for the small business endurance grants.
Correct.
And then the difference of that,
Pardon me?
what's the difference between the 155 from the 240, 71? Where was that used for?
Well, that came out of unassigned fund balance.
No, but for what purpose?
What was it used for?
Yes.
Oh, the small business endurance grant? Well, the city decided to help out the businesses.
No, not that. The difference between 155 and 240, 781.
You mean about $90,000?
No, but where was that?
Well, if you wanted to really, you could pinpoint. Rack up here as part of it was this: we had to satisfy our compensated absences. So we had to take 143,000,
from
which
that, okay.
also came out of unassigned fund balance. That was usually that's only average about 35,000, but like I say, a lot of people didn't take vacation time this last year. I don't know, maybe they know where to go, so the vacation time built up. So when we calculated it, it ended up being like I say, $143,000 more. I didn't like that big number, but geez, I started checking my reports twice. I go, is this right? For 2020, getting into the water and sewer fund, just briefly to show, okay, the revenues came in, just highlighted in green here with $536,000 more than what was budgeted on the revenue side. And like I say, a lot of it was, I budgeted based on the previous 2 years, consumption being down, but 2020, the consumption used came up 3%. Expenditures came in and highlighted in green down here, 3.5 million under budget. They say a lot of that was based on, we had the Seabreeze Drive project for 2 million. It didn't get started. That was budgeted last year. And the water rail project for 1.1 million didn't get started last year, but they are budgeted, and the budget resolution brought those budgets over for this year. Seabreeze Drive has been approved and they're going to start working on it soon. Just to hit the top 4 revenues of the water and sewer fund, water sales, 9.2 million last year, came in at almost 9.7 million actuals, $450,000 increase. The budget was 9.3 million, so we had a $371,000 increase over budget, which is the budget actuals over the budget here for the 371,000. And going down the line, sewer was 317,000 over budget, effluent 35,000, backflow maintenance fees 10,000, for a total of 734,000 over budget. Getting into 2021. Just some of the highlights. We're 3 months into the fiscal year. Most revenues, it's early in the fiscal year right now, but most revenues meeting budget.
Ron, before you
start on 2021, can we just take a step back and remind me when we redid the budget in November, what was the overall approach and adjustments for COVID? Like how was that approached for the budget update in November that we're going to be talking about now for 2021, right?
The budget for November?
Right, so like there were some decreases in revenues and some revenues.
Oh, you mean due to COVID?
I'm just wondering, when you did the latest budget update, what was your general approach, just high level?
Well, when we did the 2021 budget, I put in 15% decreases.
Okay.
And really, the budget is a 15% for 6 months. I did it in 15% in the previous year for the last 6 months and 15% for the first 6 months of this year.
In the revenues or just?
Yes, in the
okay.
revenues.
Cool. Thank you, yeah,
That-
just trying to remember what we did.
Yeah. Getting back to some highlights of 2021, like I say, most revenues meeting budget. We started a water sewer revenue sufficiency study, was approved by the board, which we began work in January, sending the data to the consultant. Report anticipated to go before the board in April. This study sets the water and sewer rates, and usually each time we've done it, we've set the rates for like 10-year periods. We're in the third year period of this current 10-year period. So, but we try to do a revenue sufficiency study at least, every 1 to 2 years to try to see how the revenues are coming in and if our rates are appropriate. Another thing that happened in November was a Duke Energy Electric franchise agreement. We had a 30-year agreement. It expired. It was reapproved by the board on November 10th for 10 years with 2 successive 5-year renewal periods. The good thing with this new agreement, the city will receive approximately $120,000 more additional revenue annually in the general fund off the electric franchise fee. They used to be able to, in the previous agreement, whatever property taxes Duke paid, they could deduct it off what they collect their money from the residents for the franchise fee. They could deduct their property taxes off that. They took that out. So now they can't deduct those property taxes off what they're reimbursing the city for the franchise fees they collect from the residents and businesses. The police and fire 3-year union contracts through 2023 were approved. Voters approved the purchase of property at 61 West Tarpon Avenue. Sale was finalized November 25th in the amount of $659,000. It was purchased from the CRA fund. Also, a 3-year fund loan was approved in the amount of $300,000 to help out the CRA fund. Water consumption used by customers was still looking good. It's up approximately 3% this year. Affluent consumption is up approximately 4%. Now, I usually got to talk about interest earnings. I like it when they're going up, and we were getting 3% or more. But I just put something here to say, example, on our $40 million portfolio, if we're down 2%, that's costing the city $800,000 a year less in interest earnings. And as always, investments, we must comply with the investment policy on what we invest in.
And you recently did a review of the investment policy, right?
Yeah, and I think we brought it before you all because we wanted to end the board, because we could only do 25% in CDs. And what happens, sometimes it depends on the market. Sometimes CDs are paying better, or sometimes federal instruments. And at that point, it seemed like CDs were paying better. And they're protected by the state, by the collateral pool. So it just seemed like, well, why can't we go instead of 25%? So we raised it to 40%. Same with treasury bills. We could only do 25%, but the treasury bills, even though they're not paying anything now, but at least it gives us the option. If they are doing better, we have the option of putting a little bit more in those. Investments. What I'm trying to do is I'm staying short, maintaining a short duration. Longer term investments right now, if I try to go out 3 years for a federal instrument, it's only paying like 22 basis points. Oops, got excited. I can get 30 basis points in the money market. So to me, it's like, what I have trouble. I know some other cities are buying investments for 3, 4, 5 years, but only getting 25, 30 basis points. And I'm just thinking, God, in 4 years, if I look at that investment, we're only getting 30 basis points. Like, I just got the feeling the market's gonna, from what I'm reading, is gonna turn. In fact, got yesterday said, some like the federal funds and treasury bills about a year from now, they're thinking they're gonna start to creep up. So what I like to do is ladder the investments, and over 18 months, I've got CDs. I've got like $1 million CD maturing each month. So in case it does start to come up, I can just roll it into something that might be a better interest rate if they do start to increase. Debt, as you mentioned, we got a payment, a 6-month payment, interest only $535,000 in April. The fire ladder truck also comes due for its second of 5 payments, $239,000 in April. Budget resolutions, we had our first one in December. It brought out, mostly bringing over stuff from 2020 that hadn't been started, like Seabreeze Drive sewering and the water well projects and some other capital projects. And yes, the fiscal year 2022 budget process is, we've started putting the budget package together, and so we're going to get it to the department heads and hope to get it out later next week, I think, or early part of March, so they can start putting in their budgets.
And that 15% that you went down, are you going to bring that back or for 22?
I don't, probably, which we'll have to, I'm just try to follow to see how these revenues go for the next couple, by the time you all are meeting in May, let's see, okay, we're 7 months into the year. So let's see how the revenues are coming in. Do we do 15% or 10% or 5% or? Oh, wrong line, sorry. General fund for the current year through December, 25% of the way through the year. I know it's a lot of numbers. I'm just trying to highlight we're at 45% actual revenues to budget, mostly due to we receive most of the property taxes, 82% of them, which is about $8 million in December. Expenditures usually were 25% or under, but due to, and you'll in the next couple slides, you might hear this some more. For the first time, as long as I've been here, we paid the police and fire city contribution, one lump sum of $1.3 million on October 1st. By doing that, we saved $75,000 versus paying it weekly as we were doing it. The payrolls paid weekly. We did our weekly contribution each week. So the actuary said, Ron, he put it in there, if you want to go ahead and pay it up front, and really it came to about $75,000. And with interest earnings being so low, it just seemed like a no-brainer and stuff. So we just went ahead, let's pay the lump sum October 1st for the police and fire. So you'll probably see some more slides where you see some differences from the previous year, and it's this $1.3 million that we paid in October. Getting into some slides here. This one's showing monthly revenues for general fund. The blue line is the revenues. As you can see, October at $877,000 of revenues. And then in December, that's the 8.1 million we got, mostly property taxes. Expenditures, the red line, 3.2 million. Yeah, it includes that 1.3 million. Because expenditures usually after December will average a little bit over 2 million going down the line here. Revenues are, like say our peak month is November, December, January, then you're gonna just see this drop off. Revenues average a little under 2.1 million for the rest of the year. Just trying to compare revenues month to month from last year. And you can see we're still, the red line is last year's. And as you can see, we went up to 7.4 million last year. And I say the rest of the year, we're a little bit under that $2 million line here per month. Expenditures, so you see for the current year, we're up to that 8.1 million for December. And the next few months, I can guarantee we're going to be right down a little bit under this 2 million mark here for the monthly revenues. Another graph of the same thing, the revenues with 2020 to 2021. As you can see, we're pretty consistently following. This is cumulative. So this 12,000 is the total at December 31st. whereas last year we were at 11,477 at December 31st. Just another way of presenting these numbers cumulative wise. Doing the expenditures, and as month-to-month expenditures, as you can see, here's this 3.2 million, which includes that 1.3 million. Otherwise, it would be down around here if we hadn't paid the lump sum payment. And as you can see, the red line is last year's expenditures, just a little bit over that $2 million line per month. And I'm sure we'll be getting to that same way with 2021. If you see little peaks here like this one right here, and then last year in the red line right here, it's usually because we've had 5 pay periods in those months. That's why they jump up like that. And expenditures comparing last year to this year, the red line being 2020. And as you can see, the blue line, and take a guess, the difference between these two lines, the 7.7 million and the 6.4 million, is that gap is the 1.3 million we paid for the pension lump sum contribution. And I would imagine this blue line is gradually going to get closer to here, because as we have paid, if we would have been paying weekly, these lines would eventually get closer towards the end of the year. Getting into some general fund numbers, comparing it by revenue type, and I won't try to go over too many of these, but as say property taxes, we had 7.7 million last year, 8.4 million this year actuals. $685,000 increase. We've received 82% of the budget. The only other one I wanted to point out was this one here. It's 280. I know it's hard to see 287,000 negative. Some of that's because we didn't receive our EMS money until January for their third payment, 135,000, and our school resource officer money. We didn't get any money for the year so far, but we got 4 months worth in January. The other, what making up a difference is performing art ticket sales and recreation fees have brought that down. I won't go into too many other stuff here. General fund revenues by type, and as you probably know, what makes up the biggest revenue? Taxes, 77%. I always like to look at the top 10 revenues, and some of you've probably already seen before. Here's the property tax and the $688,000 increase so far at December 31st. Property taxes are 37% of the total city budget. The reason it's increased, the property tax value went up 6.16%. We kept the millage rate the same at 5.37. Some of the other explanations here why we're under 25% is a lot of these state revenues are the dupe. We've only received 2 months worth. EMS fees, the contract is set for 1.6 million this year. So anything else? Permit fees, it's to see permit fees have been in this year, still having some construction activity. The county contract for fire, we're getting 419,000 this year. Just some other revenues, not quite the top 10, but school resource officer. And that's why I say we didn't receive anything yet, but we did receive 122,000 mentioned down here in January, 4 months worth. The hospital, we received that lease up front. As I say, performing art ticket sales are down 33,000 from the previous year at this time. Recreation fees down 22,000. It's nice to see local business taxes up a little bit, 6,000, almost 7,000. And code enforcement, that's up 94,000. From what I looked at, not just one big case, but there's like 3 or 4 or 5 different ones that have brought in this $113,000. Getting on the expenditure side of the general fund, personnel services, last year we, at this point, December 31st, we had 4.7 million. We're at 6.1 million, increase of 1.3 million. And you can probably guess what that is. That's the police and fire union where we paid the lump sum. Operating services, we're down about 103,000, and mostly that's due to some of the fees for contractors, for ticket sales, for performing arts, and some recreation fees are down. Capital, we got a big budget here, but that's for cemetery expansion, but we haven't spent some of that money yet. So that's why there's only a $14,000 increase. And I think that's all the highlights for that slide. General fund expenditures, what makes up the most? Well, almost 79% is 79% is personnel services of the general fund.
Ron, the personnel services, have we ever done a comparison to other municipalities of that percentage, our personnel versus other municipalities?
I've done my own impromptu one, and we're basically right around the same amount. I haven't looked for about a year or so, but we're right around the same percentage.
Okay.
Was this the next slide? Yeah. Okay. This is the fund balance again. You know, general fund, here's the restricted reserves, here's the unassigned fund balance. It's hard to predict to me right now what it's going to end up at. You know, I've really just put in some of the budgeted revenues and expenditures. For compensated absences, I put in 75,000. Maybe it won't be as much as last year. Encumbrances, it should go down. Last year, the 787,000 included the cemetery expansion. So we usually only average about 300,000 of encumbrances outstanding. The only other thing I highlighted was, you know, if the ER is not done, still we will reserve off another 70,000. So it'll bring it up to 237,000 for the ER reserve. That's money we would pay to the hospital if they get the ER room done. It's a tough projection, but you know, unassigned fund balance, 8.5 million. So far, I've just got it right around the same amount, maybe $10,000 more, 8,587,000. And total fund balance is, you know, hovering a little over 14 million for what includes a restricted and the unassigned fund balance. A little bit of the water and sewer for 2021. Just to pick out the highlights, we're at 23% revenues. You know, we're not at 25%, like I say, most of it is because half of October revenues are accrued back to the previous fiscal year, is why this isn't up at 25%. Expenditures are only at almost 19%, and mostly is that those capital projects they haven't started on those yet to expense those. The four major revenues for the water and sewer fund. So far, we've got an increase, actual to actuals, 132,000 water, 90,000 sewer. I guess they were right at 22%, but most of that's because still the same thing. We've accrued half of the October revenues back to the previous year. Just another thing to note, we do look like water consumption so far is up 3% for water and 4% for effluent. So hopefully we might have another year of consumption increases. And not this, I know maybe you want to change from the general fund and the water and sewer funds. So I thought I'd mention some of these other smaller funds. I don't want to leave them out, but they're important. And we have 40 total funds, but briefly, I just thought I'd show you. And this one, probably the first one's important. The hospital lease money where they paid us the $3 million. It's in its own separate fund. At the end of the year, projecting to have almost 3.1 million. The gas tax fund, hopefully projecting to have 123,000 at the end of the year. The school crossing guard fund, $8,200. Handicap fund, 17,000. Our impact funds, police impact fund projecting to have 419,000 at the end of this fiscal year. Fire impact, 49,000. Library impact, 404,000. They are looking for I know they want to do some more work in the library, so they might be using some of that money. Recreation impact, $32,000. We are using some of that money. We've got to extend Pinellas Trail, $184,000 out of that, and pickleball court, $75,000. We've got a general government impact fee. We've got 107,000 there. And then transportation impact fee, probably about 43,000 there. We are using some of that money towards the Mears Boulevard Phase 1 construction, $194,000. The Federal Equitable Sharing Fund, it's a police forfeiture fund, this top one. It's got $164,000. Public Art Fund, so far, based on expenditures I know of, 244,000 left at the end of the year. Land Preservation Fund, 50,000. Recycling grant, we all have 132,000 left. CRA fund, about 357,000, and that is taking out the land that was purchased, and we also had the interfund 300,000 loan coming into the CRA fund. Some other smaller funds, the Police Education Fund, there's 13,000. Police Confiscated Trust, 22,000. Employee Benefit Cost Deferral, 95,000. The Capital Project Fund, which is mostly street and sidewalk expenditures, 138,000 remaining. The Sidewalk Improvement Fund, which used to be per charter, which still by charter, was a street and sidewalk improvement fund. We're projecting 1.8 million left in that. Plan on using 100,000 this year. The Penny Fund, once in local option sales tax fund, plan on having so far, unless something else comes up, maybe about 493,000 left in that fund at the end of the year. Getting away from the funds there and just mention that, we might already mention this, but the water plant bond, current principal, 30.6 million, will pay off 975,000. At the end of the year, the balance will be 29.6 million on that. The fire ladder truck lease at the beginning of the year, 894,000. We'll pay 216,000 of principal, and we'll leave a balance of 677,000. And interfund loans from one fund to the other, we've got 5 of them. Sanitation fund to the golf course fund, we'll have a balance left of 101,000. Risk management fund to the general fund, that'll be paid off. Sanitation fund to the fire impact fund for the building to Station 71, 142,000. If we have more receipts, I've been trying to pay more down on this if possible. So it could be less than this. The water and sewer fund to the CRA fund for the Sun Bay Motel property purchase, that'll be paid off at the end of this year. Sanitation fund to the CRA fund, which was just done for that property at 61 West Tarpon. A balance of 200,000 at the end of the year, leaving total interfund loans outstanding at the end of the year of 443,000. Just to hit some of the major capital projects this year by type, we've got general government, Sponge Docks entranceway sign. We budget 135,000. Nothing's been expensed, encumbered at all, so we still have that money sitting out there. Welcome signs for the 2021 budget, 113,000. It looks like we've got that all either expensed or encumbrance, so the total's accounted for, leaving no money left. Public safety, we got the police vehicles, 441,000. Fire staff vehicles, 60,000. Body cameras, almost 223,000. Bunker gear, 122,000. And like I say, this is showing what's money remaining. It looks like body cameras hasn't been spent yet. Physical environment, cemetery expansion. This is this year's portion. Some of it was expensed in the previous year, 565,000. It's all accounted for, so there's none left. The future water well project, which was one of these ones budgeted in the previous year, almost 1.1 million. They're starting that project. Penrose Stormwater, that big project for 3.2 million. Some expenditures, the rest is a purchase order encumbered. No money left there because it's all accounted for. The water and sewer is doing a water sewer collection building out by the water plant. It's going to cost 575,000. That hasn't been approved yet, but I think it's going before the board pretty soon. City clerk getting a new office building. Total with engineering is like 1,126,000. These are mostly earth tech money where they're drilling some holes out there in the parking lot now, which will leave about 855,000 left in that. Beckett Street Bridge has been on the budget for a while. We're waiting for the county to decide what, when they get that started, but that's for utility replacement underneath the bridge there. And here's a big Sea Breeze Drive sewer project for almost $2 million. And then the wastewater treatment plant for sewage, they want to convert from chlorine to bleach, which I think they're required to do, so they want to get ahead of that.
This is just sort of a random question. I'm sure are you adding to the budget, or was it requested to add as far as IT security with what just happened in Altamar and all that? Like, is that planned in here?
Well, they've usually got budget to try to cover that stuff.
Security, IT.
Yeah, and if they are paying some extra, maybe we could be able to cover it on the next budget resolution to bring money forward.
I'm just curious if it.
But they have the money in there to cover that.
Okay.
Getting into transportation-related capital, we got Mears Boulevard Phase 1 construction, $866,000. Mears Boulevard yard waste turn lanes, about $347,000. Anclo dredging, $642,000. Anclo turn basin, $600,000. And roadway configuration, $941,000, whatever they're doing, between Huey and Walmart down there. There's an FDOT grant to also help out with that in the tune of $750,000. Economic environment, we've got the land we purchased for the CRA for $659,000. And there's some parking downtown for $100,000 budgeted. Cultural recreation, extend Pinellas Trail, we got $430,000 budgeted. Pickleball courts, $75,000. Welcome signs of $112,000. There's some other recreation projects, a lot of them 50, 40, 30,000. So there is a lot of other culture and recreation projects at the parks going on. I'm just trying to keep this report to the larger dollar amounts. Getting away from capital projects and back on my favorite thing, investments here. They have to comply with the investment policy. Pension funds have their own. The police and fire have their own policies. As I keep harping on, I guess the rates have gone from 3% to 2%. Now we're down, if we can buy stuff on the money market, it's only at 20 to 30 basis points. Longer term rates are not, about the money market. So why go out 3-4 years in my mind to get something like that when you're hoping that, in a year that we might start seeing an uptick in rates. And that's why I say here, I'm keeping short, laddering CDs over 18 months and remaining balances in the money market or the state pools, which I can get out daily.
And how about Bitcoin? I'm just kidding.
I see all those. I see what it's up to. It was almost up to 50,000 the other day.
Yeah.
I heard at some government, I don't know if Miami was looking into Bitcoins or something. I think I'll retire first. I know you probably can't see this, but this is a report. Some reports for the investments were required to get by the investment policy to the board. They see quarterly. And it's just breaking out. I know you probably can't see it. The checking accounts, we got 15 million there. The CDs, about 18 million. And I've got them laddered over like almost one each month. One federal instrument left. I used to have like 10 or 15 of them. The pool with the FMIVT, the Florida League. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a state board, about 10 million. And this is the FMIVT pool with the Florida League of Cities, a little under 5 million. So at December 31st, we had about 51 million. Now this is higher because we've gotten about 8 million of property tax money, but usually we're hovering around about 45, 46 million of cash and investments out there. Something you probably more see here, but here's just graphically just trying to say checking accounts, 15 million, certificates about 1,000, that's 18 million. No treasury bills, 2 million in federal instruments, 15 million in the local government pools, and sort of the same thing down here, just graphing it differently. We got 31% in the checking accounts, 35% in nothing in treasury bills, 4% in federal instruments, and 30% in the pools. I just thought for my own kicks, it'd be fun to, let me show you, for my own sense of humor. No, I know. Here's our graph from the previous slide at 12/31/20 where we were, and here's where we were a year ago. Checking accounts were about the same, 15 million. CDs have gone from 11 million last year to 18 million this year. So we're doing more CDs. Federal instruments were at 23 million last year. Now we're only at 2 million. And as you can see, the difference is a lot, besides CDs being increased, as local government pools were at 15 million, whereas last year we're a little under 2 million there. I show this one too, because this is required by the investment policy that we show the activity for the most recent quarter. And basically it's just showing you when something matured, transferred, or got called. Purchase CDs, we're required to say what the activity was during the year. And that's what I'm trying to show you. The date it happened, what was transfer mature, what it was, the percentage that we were getting on it, and the amount of the investment that we bought or what was called. We're getting there. I'm almost done. Don't worry. Just thought I'd mention budget resolutions. This year, we've had the one, of course, so we bring over stuff that was not completed or started. And as these were outstanding purchase orders. Capital items not started, like that Seabreeze Drive and the water well project. Donation balances are brought forward. CRA had a couple budget resolutions, one for the purchase of property at 61 West Tarpon Avenue, and the other one for some smaller capital items that the board approved. Lastly, but not least, the budget for 2022, I just sort of put together a somewhat tentative schedule. February, we're developing the budget package right now. It's going to go out to the departments, hopefully maybe end of next week or March 1st to the department heads. Then they'll intensely work on their budgets and stuff and get them back by the end of March. April, finance department compiles everything, the requests, the payroll, capital, and put the budget together. Hopefully get a budget to the city manager by the end of April, first part of May. May 13th or earlier, get the budget books to the budget advisory committee. I put in some tentative budget advisory meeting dates. We've usually met on Thursday. I don't know if it'll work out, but the May 20th, 27th, June 3rd was when you meet with the department heads on the 2022 budget. July 12th, maybe roughly around there, get the budget to the commissioners. I put in some tentative board commissioners budget workshops. They've usually sometimes had them on Thursdays. I put down July 29th, August 5th, August 12th. I'm not sure if those will work out or some people are on vacation. Tentative public hearing dates. I've got September 7th, a Tuesday for the first public hearing, and September 22nd, the Wednesday. It's probably something we're going to have to look at. Usually we do September 3rd, which last year was a Thursday. This year it's a Friday, so I don't know if we want a first public hearing on a Friday. And we can't do it per state statutes, we can't do it before the 3rd. So that's why I say if not the Tuesday the 3rd, the Friday the 3rd, maybe Tuesday the 7th. There's no regular board meeting. Maybe we do the first public hearing on the 7th. And then have the second public hearing on the 22nd. And what we also got to take into account is our public hearing dates. They can't be on the same day as the county, which the county has their first public hearing on September 9th. They have their second one on September 21st, the Tuesday. And the school board has their one meeting on Tuesday, September 14th. So we cannot have our meetings on the same days as the county and the school board. And with that, that's the wrap up.
Thank you, Ron. It's impressive. You have a voice still. I would not have a voice. Thank you. I don't have any questions. I asked mine when we were going over ones. Anybody have any questions? All good? You good? All right. Okay.
Beautiful.
I think you're good, Ron. It was just that good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
All right. Number 4 is set date for internal auditor review of applications. I guess that the deadline for them to submit the applications, if I read this correctly, is March 5th. So that'll be our next meeting, right, Michelle?
Our next meeting would be March 18th.
And will that work for that date or no?
That probably
Yes,
will.
yes.
It will?
Yeah.
If that changes with the commission, just let us know, Mark, okay?
Okay.
Is everybody fine with that? That'll be our next meeting. Everybody good in town? Okay. All right. Questions or comments on anything?
Yes, question that
Sir.
you and I were kicking around. What happened with I thought there were 3 to 4 good candidates that we reviewed last for the internal audit. Did they disappear or what? Or-
I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to forget that.
You're trying to forget.
We ended up with 2 to interview. I forget what happened with 3 or 4. I think
Okay.
we started 3. 1 went out. We had 2 that they had the full interview process with.
Yep.
They decided one over the second one. And shortly after, we kept getting questions from that candidates and more questions and more considerations. And she decided to stay with St. Leo College, which we were wondering, well, me, but I got a suspicious mind because of my background sometimes. I thought we were maybe being leveraged over the position. Now, maybe we were, maybe we weren't, but whatever. When the questions started coming in after the choosing, we got worried. And then she finally, when we said, listen, you need to come or not come, she declined. The commission decided the second one they interviewed, they'd rather go out for another pool to look at. Some of you got to go on some of these fast because they get other jobs. By the time we've reviewed and get them and stuff, they've got other jobs. I think that's how we lost a few of the other candidates for the list. But we had somebody we thought was ready to come and ready to go and came to the board that's ready to get forward and doing it. And then it didn't happen. So,
Okay. You've been used before, yeah.
yeah. However it turned out, I thought she would be a very good, I thought she'd be a very good candidate for us. So, you know, but we've had to hit the drawing board before on these things. So we're going to try again.
My only comment, I made it to David. This is a very tough position to fill, in my opinion, because it's not part of, like the purchasing team or finance. This is like an island out there. It's a little bit of big brother working for the Board of Commissioners, looking at over everybody's act. Very difficult position.
Very tough one to fill.
All right.
We'll do it.
Is that it for you, sir? You good?
Good.
You good? Anybody else? Okay, public comments. I don't see any in the audience. Is there anybody online?
We do not have anyone in attendance online.
Okay, staff comments. Mark, Michelle, Ron, good.
No, definitely Ron doesn't.
No, I don't know how, I'm thoroughly, I can talk a lot, but he's impressive. Okay. Board comments. I think we all got everything hashed out. Anybody have anything left to say? Okay. Our next meeting is March 18th, which we just discussed. Does anybody have any items for that agenda besides the internal auditor? Anything you want discussed? If so, just reach out to Michelle. We will adjourn at 3:07 p.m. Thank you.